Hello and welcome to my presentation about how to leverage large language models in the software development process. My name is Fabian Riedlsperger and I'm the CTO at Kickscale. We develop a conversational intelligence platform. So this is a very dear topic to our hearts, and today I'm going to talk about a little bit of our experiences, how we utilize large language models in the development process to be more efficient. So let's have a quick look at the content that we'll be covering today. So first of all, I'm going to jump a little bit into LLM background. So how do those models work? I'm going to talk a little bit about challenges and limitations when working with those models. I'm going to give you some guidelines that you can keep in your head whenever you're working with such tools. Then we will have a quick look at how to do proper prompt engineering. So what are some aspects I need to consider when writing a prompt? I'm going to go over some use cases that we have defined or we have used at Kickscale ourselves. I'm going to give some real-life examples from our development team where they helped us. I'm going to go over some pitfalls and considerations. And last but not least, I will give a short conclusion on this topic and some of my opinions. All right, now let's start with the large language model background. So basically, this is all relevant for now transformer-based models, which are probably all of them that are out there right now. So ChatGPT, Llama, Gemini, or the Mistral models. All of those models are probabilistic. That means they generate their outputs solely based on probabilities. Yeah. Also, they are autoregressive models, which means they generate one token at a time, and this token is then appended to the input and used for the input for the next token. They are trained on a vast amount of natural language data, mostly scraped from the internet. So they are very good at understanding natural language, and they are very good at producing natural language. As I said, they are all probabilistic, so there's no real rule or reasoning system behind it. So we have to keep that in mind. And also, I think what is important to keep in mind is that the longer the response is, the bigger the possible solution space, which on the other hand means the less likely it is that the result that I'm looking for is going to be the one that is going to be output. So what are some challenges and limitations when working with large language models? So probably the one thing that comes to the head of the most of us is hallucinations. This is a case where the model produces output that in the first look seems sensible, but it is actually wrong. And the model dreams up something because it doesn't have enough context or knowledge about the topic. And this is very dangerous. Also, we cannot ensure factual truthfulness or correctness. Also, when we are generating code, there's no way of ensuring that this is actually true or correct. Also, it has a limited contextual knowledge, so it does not know who you are, where you are working, what your company does, what product you're building. So you always have to supply it with that context. Also, those models exhibit somewhat of a chaotic behavior, which means a little change in the input might result in a totally different output. Also, the programmatic integration of those results is kind of challenging, especially if you're building an AI product. There are some ways you can circumvent that or at least make it a little bit better, but it's still a challenging task. And whenever I'm researching new use cases, most of it is basically trial and error. So I have to iterate on the prompt, try a lot manually. So this is also a little bit of a challenge. Now, I will give you some guidelines that I keep in my head whenever I'm working with ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot. So I think of it as a sparring partner. So basically the idea is still coming from me, but I use those tools to validate my ideas, to challenge my ideas, to get a new perspective on it. Also, what I always do when I'm trying to solve a task with those models, I ask before, now what might be some relevant information that the model needs to help me best solve this task. This is also very good to get a more holistic view on that topic. I also always ask for suggestions rather than directly solving those problems, because this might make me aware of some aspects that I have not considered before. Also, I always try to conversate and interact with the model, so I don't try one prompt and then say, all right, it didn't work. I try to talk with it, guide it into the right direction, and then most of the cases you get it to a result that is quite good. Obviously, always try to split up the tasks or bigger tasks into smaller, confined subtasks. In my opinion, the real problem solving should still involve humans. So you should not do or lets the model do the problem solving itself, but it's just a sparring partner. Always fact check your responses, especially when you're generating codes. You can introduce bugs that are really hard to fix afterwards if you did not check correctly. And I always think of the output of those models as kind of a starting point for me, which kind of gets me going a little bit faster. All right, now to prompt engineering. So how do I write a good a good prompt that helps me reach my result that I want to reach better? Now, first of all, you need to provide enough context. So when you're trying to solve a problem, think yourself, what information would I need to solve this problem? All of this information should be supplied in the prompt itself. You can also ask the model to impersonate a certain persona. For example, if you have a coding task in TypeScript, you can tell it, all right, now behave as you were like a experienced React or TypeScript developer with a lot of experience. This might also improve the results. Now, wording matters a lot, so try to be really concise with your words. Do not use generic words. Clearly specify the steps that the model should take in order to solve the task. Give it really clear instructions also on the output that you are expecting from it. And there are also some other more advanced prompting techniques, for example, in context learning, chain of thought prompting, retrieval augmented generation. But if you're interested in those, I suggest you look them up online. There are a lot of resources that can help you make your prompts even better. Now let's have a quick look at use cases that we have at Kickscale, where we find the use of those tools really promising and potentially make us more efficient. Now, first of all is obviously coding itself. We also use it a lot for refactoring, for debugging and testing our code. Like my most liked use case is probably brainstorming, where I have an idea and I use it as a sparring partner. You could also use it to analyze recording, which is obviously the product that we are building ourselves. And another nice use case is custom GPTs. What exactly they are, we'll go into later. Now let's start with the coding use case. So there are different use cases for that. So you could use it for code completion directly in your IDE, which just tries to analyze or tries to predict what code you're writing and gives you a suggestion of what. This works really good, and I've been using it for probably like 2 years now, GitHub Copilot, and I could not imagine coding without anymore. It makes me so much more faster when writing code. You could also use it to completely generate new code, for example, a new React component, a whole new function. And there are different services out there that you could use. The most prominent probably, and the best one right now is probably GitHub Copilot. There are also some other services like Tab9, but just look it up online. You will find a lot of those. You might also want to look into self-hosted local if you're a very privacy-aware company. Actually, if you have a MacBook Pro, most of those open source models you can run locally. So even if you're not allowed to use Copilot or any other service that sends information over the internet, you can install one of those local models like Starcoder or Code Llama on your MacBook Pro, given that you have at least an M1 and enough RAM, but this is also very nice. Now we'll give a short example, a real-life example that we have had in our development. So I don't know if you can read the prompt properly, but basically what I'm telling it here, you're an experienced TypeScript developer. I want to create the dialogue that prompts the user if he wants to analyze a meeting. This dialogue should have 2 buttons in the dialogue, which says close and analyze. Now create some dummy functions for that. It should have a title and also a text as content. And as you can see, the result is quite impressive. I could just use this, paste it, adapt it a little bit, and like writing the prompt probably took me around 1 to 2 minutes. And if I want to do all of the code myself, I would probably use up 10 to 15 minutes. So I saved 10 minutes of my day. And I can use this, as I said, as a starting point. Next up, we also use it a lot for refactoring. So what I'm always doing here, as I said before I do the refactoring, I always ask it to suggest some improvements on how to refactor this code. Now you could tell it, all right, I need my code to adhere to the solid principles. I want to split up the functions, single responsibility principle. It should adhere to my naming conventions. I can also include my coding standards, and I can also ask it to improve the maintainability or readability of the code. A short example here. So basically, I again tell it you're an experienced React developer. I need help refactoring a component. It should be readable, maintainable. It should adhere to my coding standards and enforce separation of concerns. I include my coding standards. And then I, for example, include a React component that I've written, but it's way too big and not refactored. And as a result, I get some action items basically on what I could do to improve those or to get to those requirements that I put in there. And then I can also use the model to act on those action items and do the refactoring for me. Now, depending on the size of the code you want to refactor, this can save you a lot of time and also a lot of thought. And also it's a really nice learning mechanism because you always get to see new ways of how you could refactor and improve your code. And this probably saves up to 30 minutes, yeah. We also use it a lot for debugging and testing. So what you can do, you can analyze your code. You can tell it to detect possible error sources that have not have been covered yet. You can interpret obscure error messages, which is really useful if it's something that you've never encountered before. You can also ask it to give you alternative solutions to problems. So if you have like a big function that does some complex calculation and you know it probably could be written a little bit easier, you can ask it to do that for you. Obviously, you can write really good unit tests for it, like system and integration tests is a little bit more complex because it would need a lot of context for it to work. You could also let it generate dummy object for testing or detect edge cases for it. You can also use it for test-driven development, where you start with a natural language description of the function or the component that you want to write, and then it should generate the test before you have any code. And then based on this test, you can then generate the function, which makes test-driven development a lot faster as well. Now here's a short example from our own development. So we have a script that encrypts and decrypts all of our secrets. I had the problem when I switched to my Mac from a Linux system that on a Linux system it ran well. On Mac I got some weird error. I did not know what to do because I'm new to Mac. So I just put in there, all right, I need help adapting a Linux shell command to a Mac command. And this is the error that I get. I insert the command and basically it took me 1 to 2 minutes to fix this problem. Otherwise I would have Googled it, probably looked up 15 minutes. It's not a hard problem, but still it takes time to research it. And it probably saved me 15 minutes of my day. Now, as I said, my most liked use case is for brainstorming. So whenever I come up with new ideas or I have a hard decision to make, I try to conversate with ChatGPT to get a better perspective on the problem that I'm solving. You can use it for new features that you're designing, also for user experience. UI is kind of hard because it doesn't have a good visual understanding yet. Also for DevOps topics, you could brainstorm coding standards. So what you need to consider when you are building up your coding standards. You can also use it for task splitting. So if you have like a big epic, you can ask it to split it into smaller subtasks, which you can then take and create tickets from. Also for holistic decision making, as I said, if you have a hard choice to make, it's always good to get a new perspective and let it list out the advantages and disadvantages of every option that you have. You could also use it to brainstorm your tech stack. So if you need to make some addition to your tech stack, you could ask it to list out the options that you have. And funnily enough, it's also very good at prompt engineering itself. So you could use the model to basically make itself work better. Now, real life example from here, we've been recently building up or expanding our coding standards. I told it, all right, we're in the process of defining and documenting our coding standards. We are using React TypeScript and we are using Node and SJS in the backend. What might be some aspects that I need to consider when I'm building up a professional coding standard definition? And as you can see, it put out a lot of information for me. So probably 20% of this result is not relevant to me, but still it got my brain going and it picked up some nice aspects that I did not consider myself before. And this is more like a quality improvement and not really a time saver, but my work just gets more professional through this. The next example, which is very adjacent to the thing that we are actually building, is you can also use it to analyze recordings that you have. So for this to work, you first need to record the conversations, you need to transcribe the recording, and then you can use this transcription to extract summaries, organize information, or for example, also extract next steps or action items. So we use it at Kickscale. We use our own product. Fortunately, we are building such a product ourselves. for example, for a sprint planning sync, where we discuss a lot of different topics, where there's a lot of information, a lot of aspects that are being considered. And if you do not put it directly into your ticket system, it's probably information lost. And with this, we can just go back into the recording, look at the summary, look at the next steps that have been defined, and it makes the information way more accessible to everybody. Now, last but not least, I want to quickly talk about custom GPTs. So custom GPTs are basically specialized instances of a model that already have some pre-built knowledge into them. You can use it, for example, as a refactoring GPT, where you build in all of your coding standards per default, so you do not have to paste all of this information again and again into all of your prompts. You would just need to paste in the code that you want to refactor, and it will take the knowledge from the knowledge base that you have basically created for it. There are a lot of other interesting use cases as well, like feature requirements engineering. We also have a dev tooling GPT, where there are a lot of where we documented our manual processes that we need to do. For example, if you want to fix an error, and if somebody new comes into the company, he doesn't have to read through 20 pages of documentation. He can just ask the GPT, all right, this error occurred. What do I need to do to fix it? You could also use it for system architects. You put in all of your tech stack and you can ask questions about it. And on a side note, you can also use it for other domains. For example, for sales, you put in your ideal customer profile, the product you're building. And you can use it for brainstorming, also for marketing. Now, as I said, we already have like this dev tooling GPT built up. So I wrote down all of the processes that I do when I fix a certain error. I put it in a document. I built this custom GPT, and now our juniors, our new onboardings can just go into this GPT. They tell it, all right, what should I do if, for example, in a transcript there are too many participants recognized, and then it gives you a step-by-step instruction what you actually need to do to fix this error. Like find out the meeting ID, manually review how many participants were actually in there. Now we have a script for that, so we can fix that. You put in information into that and then just execute the script. Now this makes the life of junior developers a lot easier, because they don't have to read through 100 pages of documentation to get the information that they want. And yeah, it also makes every one of our lives a little bit easier. So what are some pitfalls and considerations when heavily using those tools or ChatGPT? Now, what I've noticed in myself is kind of some mental laziness. So the first thing I tend to jump to GPT and ask it for help without even thinking about the problem on myself before. That's always something you should do. You should make your own thoughts before and then use it as a sparring partner for that. Also, there's some kind of over-reliance where you instantly jump to GPT if you have like a small task to solve. But in some cases, like writing a good prompt might take you longer than actually doing the task yourself. Obviously, it is not a magic wand, so it cannot infer knowledge that it doesn't have, and it cannot solve unsolvable problems. You also want to consider what programming language you are using, because obviously it is trained on a lot of JavaScript or Python code. But if you're a Fortran developer, then you might have a hard time using it in your development process. I want to emphasize again, it has limited context, so always make sure to provide it with all the information that you would need to solve this problem. Also beware of bad and inconcise prompting, because that can cost you more time than it may save you. Also, never ever copy-paste results without looking at them. This, as I said, might include some errors or incur some errors that are hard to fix then. And obviously, security and privacy is always a consideration, especially for bigger companies, and also copyright might be a consideration, because you might get code that is from another repository. Now, last but not least, my conclusion on this topic and some of my personal opinions. I think this is a very powerful tool that helps increase the efficiency of every developer. And I think every company that does software development should, to some extent, make use of those tools. Otherwise, they are going to get left behind. I think those tools empower small teams a lot more. So I think that the trend is going to go to leaner teams, because you can do a lot now with 5 people and those tools. You can build really nice products with it. Also, it reduces like the mundane work, like the boilerplate code. You don't have to write it yourself anymore, and it frees up the time to do work that really brings value to your customers. and yeah, like the problem solving, creativity, you have more time for that. I think it's a very transformative technology. Even if we look back 2 years now, nobody would have imagined what those things can do right now. And just looking again 2 years into the future, I think it's going to be another big change. Also, all of those tools make programming way more accessible. So I hope there will be a lot more programmers in the future. And at some point, we might not even need any programming languages anymore. We just can program with natural language in a few years from now. I think all of this is just the beginning. On a side note, so if we think about agents, you just tell it, all right, I have this feature I want to do it for me, and it does it. And I think it's not too far away right now. And on an ending note, I don't think those tools will replace programmers. The job of a programmer will definitely look different in a few years from now than it does now, but it will always need humans to guide the tools, to use the tools, and to create value for other humans. So thank you for your attention. If you're interested in working with us, check out our job page, leave us a message, reach out to us, and I hope you could learn something today. Thank you.